Colleagues, we continue our work, and I invite to the presentation during our traditional briefing advisor for the Prime Minister of Ukraine, Danylo Lubkivsky. Please. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. It's a great pleasure to be in Ukrainian Crisis Media Center, and I'm happy to speak to the audience after Dmytro Shivkin, who outlined ideas the National Council of Reform has. Those are great ideas, and no doubt that those ideas are shared and should be supported, of course. Ukrainian government clearly tuned to implement those tasks. They are not easy, but that are written in a coalition agreement and in the program of our government. Let me, at the very beginning, start with greeting Ukrainian Crisis Media Center that you work here for a year. It's a great pleasure to mention that because our team was participated in the creation of the center in March last year, when I personally was in the leadership of foreign ministry. It's great that the center is functioning and there is complete love and sympathy from our side. I would like also to say that it was a very difficult year, a year of changes, many dangers. And when we became aware of a great need of communication with the world, that's why I would like to start my briefing with I would like to inform you about my two last trips to my partners. In February I was in Vienna. I was invited by Industrial Center of Austria, and I had a meeting from my colleagues, advisor for the Chancellor, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and several days ago I came back from a very important visit to Warsaw. During that trip, I had a pleasure to speak in two centers, in Polish Institute of Foreign Relations and in Analytical Center Politics Inside. I informed them what is happening in Ukraine, what the government does, and I told them about our priorities. I had very good meetings with an advisor on foreign issues, with the with President of Poland, Deputy on Foreign Affairs, Mr. Sokolov, with Foreign Ministry, with our colleagues and friends, among whom Adam Michnik, Balcerovich, Miroslavchuk, many of those supporters of Ukraine. And the main point of those important conversations in Vienna and in Warsaw is that we need to explain and we need to speak to the society and to the world. We have a big problem. We don't know how to interpret. We don't know how to explain. And we don't know how to communicate with the world. That problem, that Prime Minister Yatsenyuk articulates that we need to have a better position of Ukraine abroad, and that's why for that task the Prime Minister of Ukraine encourages a newly created Ministry of Information and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We need to put more efforts. We need to be better in explaining our events, and also we should meet calmly and with confidence those challenges because of colossal propaganda campaign of President Putin. That campaign is focused against Ukraine. And we understand that that today the government is run by Yatsenyuk is the name of that propaganda. And this government of Ukraine, despite all difficulties and all the steps, actions, changes, this government is a target for many threats. First of all, I would like to underline that all of us, Ukrainian citizens, we are under daily huge threat of local corruption and inefficiency of post-Soviet bureaucratic structures. Not outrooted, and it takes time to replace them, and we need hard will of the president and the head of the government and also our parliament. That huge local corruption, the inefficiency of public structures, no doubt, they choose their target. This government is the target for them. At the same time, Ukrainian government is a target for a political disorder and political populism, which looks wild under these conditions. That's why Ukrainian government calls the parliament or political forces to restrain from speculations and populist steps which have political dividends, but they're not acceptable under the conditions of the war. We invite all the teams to work together with one voice, and it's very important, especially for our internal needs, for our society, and also for international audience. That's the principal position of the government team headed by Yatsenyuk. We invite all our partners, political partners in the coalition, to speak in one voice, not to use bad comments, bad steps, and to hold the line which represents the dignity of our country. We don't give lessons to anyone. We don't preach to anyone, but we advise when we see mistakes. And we advise at that moment when it is not public. Just to save political unity in our country. And we encourage all our partners to do the same. The government of Yatsenyuk is a target for oligarchs. Because this is the first government in Ukraine, in the history of Ukraine, which started to charge fees for natural resources and influence on profits of our magnates. And there was an immediate reaction through mass media, through manipulation by public opinion. That's why we call our society not to get into a trap of manipulation, but no doubt clearly to tell the government about all the mistakes. And those steps which, in opinion of civil society, in the opinion of experts, should or can be corrected. And no doubt the government of Yatsenyuk is a target, a clear target for the propaganda campaign of President Putin.
Because President Putin today is targeting the economic and financial stability of our country, he does not want territorial gains. He wants to control Ukraine, our perspective, and in this way to control the European Union. That's why it is very important today to continue and provide for the communication with the world and our society. That is the obligation of the government. When we talked in Warsaw, Leszek Balcerowicz quoted an example. Jacek Kuroń went every week to the people, telling them in a simple language what was happening. This principle has to be effected in Ukraine as well. I think that we should, as the Prime Minister does, as the ministers do of the cabinet of the Minister of Ministers, to freely, calmly, and reasonably explain what's going on. And of course, for us, a great priority is our foreign audience. In order to do this, today the Prime Minister has issued instructions to ministers to go to foreign capitals, to our partners, to explain what has happened over the last year and over the recent 100 days, and the activity of the cabinet. And at the same time, he does clearly say that we should augment the activity of the Ministry for Foreign Affairs and the Ministry for Foreign and Information Policy. And now I'll brief you in English
And let me start my English briefing. So, first of all, as usually, let me express my gratitude to our interpreters who suffer a lot. So you are victims of that process. I wish you all the best, and let me inform you about some major developments that we have here. First of all, let me inform you that the Cabinet presented recently the general assessment of what has been accomplished here in Ukraine and what our key priorities are. That important assessment was published and was introduced to all our international partners. Let me show you, this is the general presentation called Russia's War, Ukraine's Freedom, and our Ukraine's, Europe's future. Let me say that I'm honored to present the results of the Cabinet's 100 days in the office. First, it is a war cabinet. Its most important task was preserving our statehood and unity, countering the Russian aggression. Second, the government is comprised of determined professionalism. I'm happy and I wish to remain so glad that the President, the Cabinet and the House remain committed to deliver reforms. I value personally dearly practical assistance, criticism, and advice of volunteers who cooperate actively with the Cabinet and line ministers. I admire their dedication and talent. Despite the war with a nuclear power and cynical opponent, Ukraine has achieved quite a lot, and we should be aware of this. Our clear roadmap is the Ukraine-EU Association Agreement. You obviously know my personal stance on this case. Having established a mechanism of implementation and introduced a wide range of executive programs, this Cabinet is committed to ensure our obligations in full and with no delay. We implemented 3 austerity packages and introduced realistic budget of 2015. This Cabinet has paid all pensions, welfare and salaries despite lost business activity and industry. The government has accomplished the first stage of the fiscal reform. A general number of taxes were decreased from 22 to 11. Let me say that inspections of small and medium-sized businesses are banned, prohibited for 2 years. Aim of the single social payment is to motivate employers to pay official salaries. We started reducing the pension fund deficit. A fair system is introduced for the special pensions. Luxury tax and tax on passive income, as well as increased payments for extracting natural resources, will help us finance the state budget. We countered corruption at macroeconomic level with no intermediaries in energy supply, in energy sector. As a result of the first stage of the budget decentralization, regions already received the right to administer a series of taxes. We cut the number of controlling agencies from 56 to 28. New deregulation measures introduced in agricultural, oil and food, IT industries will gain an estimated economic result of around $4 billion till 2020. Unprecedented defense budget that constitutes 5.2% of Ukraine's GDP ensures modernization of the Ukrainian armed forces. The government will keep in full promises to defenders of our land and their families. The government allocated additional $3 billion Ukrainian hryvnias, meaning $140 for rehabilitation and other assistance to temporarily replaced persons and participants of the anti-terrorist operation. Let me personally thank, on behalf of the Prime Minister of Ukraine, Mr. Arseniy Yatsenyuk, everyone who donated to the army refugees from the East and Crimea. Ensuring energy security was among the most pressing issues in this winter. Today, 70% of gas Ukraine buys in Europe, not in Russia. Energy efficiency programs and subsidies for people will contribute to eliminating the deficit of energy resources in the next session. In the summer, Ukraine will stockpile in our facilities enough gas for the winter. Due to its determination, this cabinet succeeded in keeping foreign trust in Ukraine's perspective. And that's the most important part of the activities of these 100 days. The International Monetary Fund's board approved an extended arrangement under Extended Fund Facility of 17.5 billion of the United States dollars for 4-year aid program for Ukraine. The fund acknowledged our results and further plans. There is no reform program for IMF that this cabinet ensures and implements. There is a program of reform for this country and this nation, for Ukraine. Ukraine's partners abroad believe in government's ability to bring the reforms to conclusion. This is an important sign to investors that the government fulfills the obligations and the economy will eventually come out of recession. In general, let me underline this. The European Union, G7, leading international partners of Ukraine, among them the United States, have voiced strong support for the Ukrainian cabinet, for the Ukrainian reforms and the government's program. These 100 days
Ці 100 днів були неприємними, не були щасливими, ніхто не задоволений. Перша війна перша зима закінчилась для України, і уряд хоче продовжувати завдання. Зараз стоять такі великі, через те, що протягом попередніх років на них не звертали уваги. Шлях вперед, звичайно, не буде легким. Якщо ми об'єднані, ми вийдемо із цих викликів сильнішими. Пані та панове, дозвольте мені наголосити, цей кабінет міністрів є ціллю. Ми всі України, на нас нападає корупція, інститути, які ще залишилися із совєтських часів. Уряд вважає, що ця хвороба і ці наслідки потрібно їх лікувати всім суспільством, нашими громадянськими активістами, а також лідерами громадськості. Моральна цілісність має бути захищена всіма нами. Потрібно її обороняти разом. Цей кабінет закликає парламент, а також всіх наших політичних партнерів уникати від будь-яких можливостей популізму або неправильної поведінки, яка направлена на те, щоб отримати плюси, які неприйнятні під час війни. Кабінет є ціллю для магнатів, олігархів, російських та українських, через те, що це перший уряд України, який збільшив виплати за добуток природних багатств. Негативна реакція була відразу помічена. Кабінет закликає на суспільство не попасти в пастку або не піддаватися на маніпуляцію цих несправедливих суджень. Уряд Яценюка, кабінет Яценюка, на нього направлено, він під прицілом Путіна. За цією кризою Путін підійшов близько для того, щоб досягти своєї мети і дестабілізувати Україну. Не мати ілюзій щодо цього. Росія продовжує напад, продовжує атаку. З лютого військові російські обстрілювали українські позиції, обстрілювали більше 1000 раз. Відхід їх або частково проводиться, або це зовсім не відхід. Росія не звільнює українських політичних полонених, Савченко, Сенцова і інших. Вони насилають. Росія не дозволяє контролювати контроль. Там десь біля 300-400 кілометрів. Росія не відвела свої військових, а також і зброю. Військова Росія залишається не міняє свою стратегію. Путін не знає, не хоче отримати захопити територію, він хоче відібрати майбутнє України. Немає ніякого іншого варіанту, але збільшити вартість цієї агресії для Путіна. Перше, це означає, що потрібно підсилити український оборонний потенціал. Друге, це означає, що потрібно розвернути санкції проти Росії, направлені проти фінансового сектору. Третє, це означає зберегти єдність в Європейському Союзі, а також в США, між США та Євросоюзом. Четверте, потрібно загарантувати єдність Євросоюзу разом з Вашингтоном, щоб вони були разом. А також потрібно гарантувати економічну стабільність в Україні, захищаючи, обороняючи себе проти російської агресії. Україна завжди також обороняє Європейський Союз. Ми не перецінюємо себе, як я вже говорив недавно у Варшаві. Ми точно знаємо, що ми робимо і проти чого ми боремося. І це правда, або за що ми боремося. Це факт, дозвольте, це правда, дозвольте мені на цьому наголосити. Зараз Україна обороняє Євросоюз. Падіння Україні також відкриє двері російському впливу, а також домінуванню в Європі. Над Європою. Європейські лідери повинні змінити своє бачення, менталітет свій. Якщо Україні не вдасться оборонити себе, тоді не буде ніякого сумніву, що їм прийдеться набагато більше витрачати на свою власну оборону. Єдиний шлях, як доказати Путіну, що він не правий, це за допомогою програм допомоги, які дозволять стабілізувати Україну. Економіка також буде приваблювати капітал до України. Український уряд відданий тому, щоб проводити радикальні зміни. Ми всі маємо стати проти Путіна. І тоді йому буде тяжко, але це можна зробити за рахунок співпраці також України та міжнародної громадськості. Дуже дякую вам.
Я хотів би повідомити додатково, перш ніж
I'd like to additionally tell you before you devise your questions that really today we are very actively communicating with our foreign partners, and the presentation that I have just mentioned is already in the capitals of our foreign partners, and it tells about the results and after effects of the Russian aggression, about the efforts of the Ukrainian Authority and the people over the last year, about the changes that took place and specific figures. I am pleased to disseminate this booklet here in the Ukrainian Crisis Media Center, as I am convinced that in order to stop the Russian aggression, which includes an absolutely wild Russian propaganda, we can only do this by common effort. Also, very soon, I hope by the end of this month, we will produce another edition of the Black Book of Kremlin, which calculates preliminarily the losses and damage inflicted on Ukraine by the Russian aggression, and we will inform of this both our public and the foreign partners. It is very important for us to stay a single unit with a clear, reasonable criticism, but without bitter rivalry, saying that we are all in one boat and we will be victorious together. Thank you for your limitless attention.